Hello friends, I'd just like to welcome you to MediaReviewsdotcom. I have no name. Now, as you saw, yes, I'm going to make my first book review, Huckleberry Finn. Last night I finished the book. Now, let me tell you something about this book. Many people consider it to be a classic, but that's my problem. Most people have never read this book. Adults have, but kids who consider it a classic have probably never read it. And if they were, they'd be bored out of their minds. I'll tell you, this was not a really entertaining book. It was boring and dull. Now, I'm not saying it's a classic. I'll get to that later. But what I'm saying is that it's not really an entertaining book. I would say it's a classic, but it's not entertaining in any way. Now, Mark Twain can be a really funny author, but he doesn't really display it in Huckleberry Finn. Now, many people consider this to be a classic because of the way it portrays the slave age. In fact, one of the main characters in the book, Jim, is a slave. Now, this is the only really saving grace for me, because Jim is a really interesting character, and it portrays exactly what a slave was like in that era. Now, the whole point of the book is that Huckleberry Finn runs away from his dad, who's an alcoholic, by the way, and he meets up with Jim, who happens to have belonged to Huckleberry's last, I would say, parent. Now, there's this whole thing about the lawsuit and how Huckleberry's dad isn't a good person, so Miss Watson is her name, is trying to get a hold of him, just to keep him as her own. But the dad won't let that happen, and in the middle of the lawsuit, Huckleberry runs away. And then somehow he finds Miss Watson's slave, Jim. And the whole point is that he's trying to get to Ohio and let him live there so that he's free. Which is kind of interesting, which labels itself as being made before the slave law, the Slave Act, where in the North, any Northern officials had to help get a slave back, so he couldn't hide in the North. So, Huckleberry Finn, yeah. One of the weirdest things is that I was requested to read this before Tom Sawyer, which maybe explains a little bit why I don't understand some of the things that are in the novel. But I don't really want to read Tom Sawyer after reading this one. Originally, this book was supposed to be called The Autobiography of Huckleberry Finn, which would follow him from the end of Tom Sawyer until he was an adult. But, of course, it got changed. Now, if anything, this book kind of reminds me of Forrest Gump, except it happens in a couple of months. It doesn't go throughout his entire life. Now, or most of his life. So Huckleberry Finn, yeah, I didn't enjoy it so much. Now, it is a classic though, because it pretty much makes fun of the Southern life. Now, Mark Twain was Southern, so this probably PO'd a lot of Southerners in the area, because it basically says, yes, slavery is bad, and the way we're living is not a good way to live. Which is very interesting. Now, about that Forrest Gump thing, there's a bunch of things that happen to him, and that's one of my problems. It seems that there's all these conflicts that are introduced, but the only thing is, we never get a conclusion for him. Because he goes to all these places, he learns about their conflicts, but they never get solved because he doesn't stay with them. He just runs off to go down the Mississippi River to Ohio. Now, that was my problem. I mean, I didn't like that. Why did they introduce all these conflicts if they weren't going to solve them? I mean, maybe if Huckleberry Finn came and helped them solve the problem, I don't know. And that's my other problem. Huckleberry Finn is not your average hero. In fact, he's a rebel of church and of school, as summarized on the back of my novel. But, yeah, he doesn't have any good morals. The other thing the one thing that I really liked, well, there's actually two scenes that I like. The first one is where the sheriff or one of the guys in the town kills a drunken man. So they all follow him to his house with clotheslines to hang him. And then this guy gives this whole speech about how, everybody around the world basically are just cowards and that they won't be able to hang him. And then the thing that really PO'd me about that is that they never finished that either. It was pretty interesting, but they never have a court case or anything. Well, at least we don't stick around long enough to learn about it. I mean, it probably happens. We just weren't able to hear about it.